If I could turn back time, I'd still make the same choice, even knowing the consequences. In that suspended moment, I felt more alive than I had in years. More alive than I ever felt in the sterile comfort of the bed I once called home. My name is Lisa. I've been married to Michael for 7 years now. He's everything a woman could ask for on paper. Successful, powerful, driven. And yet, he's absent in all the ways that truly matter. Michael provides me with a life of luxury, gives me the world on a silver platter, but somewhere in between the gifts and grand gestures, he forgot to give me himself. And somewhere along the way, I stopped being a wife and became nothing more than a shadow in his world, invisible, ignored, and overlooked. Please share your thoughts in the comment section below. Each of your shares is not only a motivation for us but also contributes to spreading value to the community. It wasn't supposed to be like this. That day, I was supposed to be on my way to my sister's house in Vermont. It was an emergency. Her son, my nephew, had been rushed to the hospital, and she needed me there. Michael, as usual, was tangled up in a web of meetings, so he sent Jerome, our family driver, to take me instead. I didn't protest, though part of me resented the thought of being carted around like a piece of luggage. I packed a small bag, sighed, and climbed into the back of the sleek black SUV that seemed to swallow me whole. The windows were tinted so dark that they cut off the outside world entirely, leaving me alone in my thoughts. Jerome had been with us for 2 years. Quiet, always polite, always impeccably dressed in his crisp uniform. He was the type who spoke only when spoken to, never pushing for conversation, always respectful. Most of the time I barely noticed him. He blended into the background of our lives the same way the furniture did. Functional, necessary, but unremarkable. He never looked at me directly unless it was to check in, to see if I needed something or if I was comfortable. But that night something shifted. I don't know if it was the strange quiet of the car, the isolation of the darkened windows, or something in the air between us that had changed. But suddenly, Jerome's presence felt different. There was something about him I had never allowed myself to see before. Something unsettling yet magnetic. I can't pinpoint when it started, but that night, as the miles stretched between us and the world I thought I knew, I realized that I was seeing Jerome in a way I had never done before. His calm demeanor hid so much more. There was a depth to those calm brown eyes, a story behind his neatly trimmed beard, a quiet confidence in the way he moved that stirred something inside me. I never let myself acknowledge it, until then. And I couldn't look away. The snow began falling just as we crossed the state line. At first, it was light, almost gentle, a quiet whisper of winter that seemed to paint the world outside in soft strokes. It wasn't the kind of snow that signaled chaos. It felt peaceful, even serene. I watched it swirl and dance in the headlights, the small flurries spinning like delicate threads in the air. I tried to focus on the beauty of it, to push away the gnawing anxiety that had taken root in my chest. My nephew was in the hospital, and my thoughts constantly circled back to him, but part of me felt a strange sense of relief to be away from my cold, lonely home. Away from Michael. Even if it was just for a weekend, I didn't mind the isolation of the car. I welcomed it. As the miles ticked by, the snow started to fall harder, heavier. The peaceful flakes turned into a torrent, swirling in furious gusts. What had once been a quiet snowfall was now a full-blown storm. The wind picked up, howling against the SUV, making the roads almost unrecognizable beneath layers of white. I could barely see anything through the windows, except for the blur of snowflakes and the soft glow of the headlights piercing the darkness. The peacefulness had slipped away, replaced by a growing tension in the air. Jerome's grip on the steering wheel tightened, the knuckles on his hands turning white against the leather. His posture shifted, leaning forward slightly, his eyes narrowing, scanning the whiteout that had swallowed the road ahead. His focus was unwavering, but there was something about the way he moved, the subtle shift in his demeanor, that made me realize this was no longer a simple drive. The storm was worse than I had anticipated, worse than I had let myself admit. I cleared my throat, breaking the silence that had settled between us. My voice was softer than I intended. "Is everything okay?" His eyes flicked to the rearview mirror, meeting mine for a brief moment before returning to the road. "I think we're going to have to pull over soon," he said, his voice calm, but there was an edge of tension in it now. "It's getting bad." The words hung in the air, and I felt a chill creep down my spine. Minutes later, the SUV began to slide, just a slight shift, but enough to make my heart race. My stomach lurched, the feeling of the car losing traction sending a wave of panic through me. Jerome's hands tightened even more on the wheel. His jaw set in a firm line. He didn't flinch, didn't hesitate. He calmly steered us to the side of the road and parked beneath a line of bare trees, their skeletal branches reaching out like dark fingers against the storm. The world outside had turned into a blur of white. Snow blanketed everything: trees, the road, the sky, leaving no trace of where we had come from or where we were going. The stillness was suffocating, the silence so thick I could almost feel it pressing in on me. No sound, just the whirling snow and the occasional groan of the wind as it howled around the car. "We'll wait it out," Jerome said, his voice steady, reassuring. "Driving in this could be dangerous." I nodded, though a knot formed in my stomach. "How long do you think?" "Could be hours," he replied, his voice low and distant. His eyes remained fixed on the storm outside. His jaw clenched, but there was a calmness to him, like he had done this before. Like he was in control. We sat in the quiet for a few moments, the only sound now the hum of the engine and the soft whir of the heater as it tried to push back the cold that had settled in the car. I pulled my coat tighter around me, trying to ward off the chill, but it didn't help. The cold had worked its way deep into my bones. I pulled my phone from my bag, hoping for a signal, but there was nothing. No bars, no GPS, no way to reach anyone. Just us and the storm, trapped in a world of snow and silence. Jerome reached up and pulled off his gloves, flexing his fingers in the dim light. I watched him from the back seat, noticing the way his muscles shifted under his jacket, the slow, deliberate rise and fall of his chest as he breathed. There was a quiet strength to him that I hadn't noticed before, a strength that went beyond his physical presence. It was in the way he carried himself, the way he remained calm and composed despite the growing tension in the air. He wasn't just a driver. There was something more to him, something deeper, something protective. I suddenly became acutely aware of everything: the cold that had started to seep into my bones, the heat of the car fighting it back, and more than anything, the presence of Jerome. It was strange, the way he seemed to fill the space between us, unspoken yet undeniable. I shifted in my seat, my eyes moving toward him again. "You okay back there?" His voice broke the silence, soft and careful, as if checking in on me. I blinked, momentarily caught off guard. "Yeah," I said, my voice almost a whisper. "Just cold." But it wasn't just the cold that had my attention. He looked over his shoulder. "You can come sit up front if you want. It's warmer." I hesitated, then I moved. I climbed into the front passenger seat and pulled my coat tighter, but even then I could feel the heat of his body beside me. For a while we said nothing. Then he broke the silence. "You don't talk much," he said. I let out a quiet laugh. "Neither do you." He glanced at me. "You notice." "I notice a lot more than you think." His lips twitched into the faintest smile. The heat from the vents hummed softly. Outside, the snow kept falling thick and slow. Inside, something else began to rise. A tension, a closeness that felt dangerous. "Are you married?" I asked, surprising myself. He shook his head. "No, not yet." "Why not?" He looked at me, his eyes serious. "Haven't met the right person." I turned my head, met his gaze. "Sometimes you meet them, but you're not free to love them." He didn't answer. He just stared at me long enough for my heart to thud a little harder in my chest. The car felt smaller, suddenly warmer. I could smell his cologne. Soft, masculine, something woody. Our knees weren't touching, but they could have been with the slightest shift. Then the lights flickered. The engine hummed lower. "Batteries aren't going to hold out forever," he said quietly. "I guess we'll have to keep each other warm." I didn't plan those words, they just slipped out, Raw, honest, dangerous. His eyes darkened. "Are you serious?" I nodded just once. I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't care. I just knew that I was tired of being untouched, tired of being seen as someone's wife instead of someone's woman. He laid the seat back a little, took off his jacket, and wrapped it around me. I didn't stop him. I leaned in. Our shoulders touched, then our hands, and slowly he reached for me. His touch was gentle, hesitant, like he was waiting for me to say no. But I didn't. I leaned into him. His lips brushed my forehead, then my cheek, then lower. It wasn't wild or rushed. It was slow, warm, intimate in a way I hadn't felt in years. And in the middle of a storm, wrapped in the arms of a man I shouldn't desire, I found something I didn't know I was missing. Not love, not lust, but the feeling of being seen. I woke up before him. The storm had calmed. Snow still covered everything outside the windshield, but the wind had died down, and the morning light turned everything into a glowing white wonderland. It was quiet, the kind of silence that presses against your ears. Jerome's arm was still around me. His chest rose and fell slowly. His head tilted back slightly against the seat. I didn't move. I just watched him, memorizing the way his face looked when he was relaxed, peaceful, strong, and gentle all at once. The scent of him was still in my nose, wrapped around me like the warmth of his jacket. My fingers tingled from where they had been curled against his chest all night. My body remembered every moment, the slow way he touched me, like he was afraid I might break or vanish. And yet now that the sun was up and reality was creeping in, I felt the weight of what we'd done. I was someone's wife, but last night I had been someone's woman. My breathing grew shallow as I tried to piece together what this meant. Was it just the snow, the cold, the loneliness? Or had something deeper happened between us? He stirred beside me, his eyes fluttered open, locking on mine immediately. For a moment we just looked at each other. No words, no guilt, just silence and a memory we both shared. "Morning," he said, his voice husky from sleep. "Morning," I whispered back. "You warm enough?" He nodded. "Yeah, thanks to you." He smiled gently and leaned his head against the window. "Looks like the roads might be clearing up. We should be able to move soon." I nodded again, but my stomach twisted. I didn't want to move. Not yet. Not back to life, not back to pretending. "Jerome," I said softly. He looked at me. "I need you to understand. I've never done anything like that before, ever." He nodded. "I know. It wasn't planned. I didn't think I could, but something about last night." "You don't have to explain," he said, cutting in gently. "I get it." His voice was calm, his eyes kind. He wasn't asking for more, he wasn't clinging. But something about that made it even harder, like he had quietly accepted that what happened in the snow would melt with the daylight. I turned my face away, staring at the endless white outside. But my mind, my body, still burned from last night. I remembered the way his hands had traced the curve of my waist, how his breath had warmed my neck, how every part of me felt like it belonged to someone for the first time in years. It wasn't rough, it wasn't rushed. It was tender, intimate, almost sacred. "Do you regret it?" I asked suddenly. He didn't answer right away. Then he said, "No, but I know you might." Closed my eyes. Did I? I wasn't sure. I just knew I didn't feel ashamed. I didn't feel dirty. I felt desired, and more than that, I felt awakened, like a woman pulled from deep sleep. We sat in silence for a while longer. Then he started the engine. It coughed, then roared back to life. We pulled out slowly onto the road, tires crunching over thick snow. The world had changed overnight, transformed into a soft white dream. But inside the car, everything felt heavier. We didn't talk much on the way to my sister's, but every time I glanced at him, at his hands on the wheel, at the quiet strength in his profile, I felt my skin heat up all over again. When we got there, I got out slowly. He opened the door for me like always, but this time his fingers brushed mine. Just lightly, but I felt it like fire. "Take care," he said. "You too." I didn't look back as I walked inside, but I felt his eyes on me the whole way. My sister's place was warm and full of noise, the kind of family noise that fills up the silence in your head. Kids laughing, pans clattering in the kitchen, my sister asking 100 questions. I welcomed the distraction, but deep down I wasn't really there. I kept seeing Jerome, feeling him, reliving everything. I stayed for 3 days. When it was time to go, I tried to act normal, but my heart raced the moment I saw the SUV pull up, and when Jerome stepped out, I forgot how to breathe. He looked just as calm, just as unreadable, but when our eyes met, there was something there. A flicker, a knowing. The drive home was even quieter, but tension sat between us like fog. Halfway there, I whispered, "I haven't stopped thinking about it." He didn't turn, just kept driving. Me neither. I swallowed hard. Was it just the snow, or was it real? He finally looked at me. "What do you want it to be?" I didn't answer. Couldn't. I didn't know. All I knew was I didn't feel lonely anymore. Not with him. When we reached home, I stepped out and thanked him. He nodded, didn't ask for anything, didn't push. But as I walked inside the house and closed the door behind me, the cold returned. Not from the weather, but from the silence of my husband sitting at his laptop, barely glancing up as I entered. "Hey," he muttered. "How's your sister?" "She's better," I replied. He nodded, eyes on the screen. "Good." That was it. No hug, no kiss, no warmth. And that's when I knew what happened with Jerome wasn't just about the snow. It was about a part of me that had been starving and finally found someone who saw me, not as someone's wife, but as a woman. The days after returning home felt like walking through a fog. Everything looked the same. My husband's shoes by the door, his coffee mug on the counter, the folded blanket on the couch. But something had shifted inside me. I wasn't the same woman who had left for my sister's place. I was quieter, more aware, more alive, but also conflicted. Each night, I lay next to my husband, eyes open in the dark, feeling a million miles away from the man who used to make my heart race. He didn't notice the change, or maybe he did and chose to ignore it. Either way, he didn't ask how I was, didn't ask about the snow, or the car, or Jerome. It was like I had never left, but I had, emotionally, physically, even spiritually. That night in the snow with Jerome had broken something open inside me. Something I didn't know I had buried. It started to haunt me. The memory of his touch, his voice whispering in my ear, the way he looked at me like I was the most beautiful woman in the world. Not just someone's wife, not someone tired and fading, but a woman desired, craved. One afternoon, a week after we returned, I saw Jerome again. My husband had a last-minute work trip and asked him to drive me to the salon. When he pulled up, I hesitated before getting in. I wasn't sure what to expect, but the moment I slid into the passenger seat and our eyes met, my heart skipped. "Hi," I said softly. "Hey," he replied. His voice was calm, but there was heat beneath it. I felt it in my chest. We didn't talk much as he drove, but the silence wasn't awkward. It was thick with the weight of everything unsaid. When we reached the salon, I paused before getting out. "I've been thinking," I said. He glanced at me. "About that night." His jaw clenched slightly. "Me too." "It felt real," I whispered. "It was." I swallowed hard. "I don't know what to do with that." He looked at me, eyes deep and sincere. "You don't have to do anything. I'm not asking for more. I don't regret it. Not even a little." I nodded, then got out, but his words stayed with me. I didn't regret it either. That evening, I stood in the mirror after my shower, wrapped in a towel. I looked at myself, really looked. My curves, my soft skin, the small mole on my hip, the longing in my own eyes. Jerome had made me see myself again, made me feel wanted. Not for what I do, or the meals I cook, or the clothes I fold, but for who I am. For the woman I forgot was inside me. The next day, I asked my husband if I could start going to yoga again. He shrugged. "Sure." He didn't ask why. Didn't care that I was trying to feel good again. So I went, but instead of yoga, I told Jerome to pick me up and take me anywhere. Anywhere but home. We ended up at a quiet park on the edge of town. Snow still blanketing the ground. We sat in the car side by side, not touching, but the air between us was thick with electricity. "I missed you," I said suddenly. He turned to me surprised. "I don't know what this is," I continued. "I don't have the answers, but I missed you. And I want to feel that again." He reached for my hand slowly, gently, and held it in his big warm palm. "You don't have to explain," he said. We didn't kiss that day, didn't touch beyond that, but it felt more intimate than anything. Because I was choosing him now, not just by accident but by want, by desire. The next time I saw him was 2 days later. My husband had gone out of town again. It was snowing lightly. Called Jerome. "Can you come?" Yes. "Where to?" "Here. My place." He arrived within 30 minutes. When I opened the door, we didn't say a word. I stepped aside. He walked in, and the moment the door clicked shut behind him, everything fell apart. I wrapped my arms around his neck and kissed him like I had waited a lifetime. He lifted me, my legs curling around his waist as he carried me to the couch. Our breasts tangled, our bodies melting into each other. It wasn't just lust. It was hunger. We didn't rush. We explored. We lingered. His hands knew every inch of me, and mine remembered every place he liked to be touched. Every sigh, every moan, every soft groan in my ear. By the time we were done, I was lying on top of him, my cheek against his chest, listening to his heartbeat, steady and strong. "I don't want to go back to who I was," I whispered. He held me tighter. "Then don't." I closed my eyes, and for the first time in a long time I felt free. I never thought I'd be the kind of woman who kept secrets. The kind who looked her husband in the eye and lied. But after Jerome and I crossed that line again in my living room, I became someone else. Someone torn between duty and desire, comfort and passion, the known and the unknown. And the truth. I liked who I was with Jerome more. He saw me, every part of me. Not just the wife who cleaned and cooked and smiled on cue, but the woman inside. The one who craved something real, something wild, something more. Days passed, then weeks. We kept seeing each other, quietly, carefully. Sometimes in the car, sometimes at a hotel off the interstate, sometimes when I was really brave, in my own house while my husband was away. Every time I was with Jerome, I felt like I was on fire. Like my skin came alive under his touch. Like my voice, my laugh, my pleasure finally had space to breathe. But each time he left, the silence was louder than ever. I'd sit on the edge of my bed, fingers tangled in my hair, staring at my reflection in the dark mirror. Who was I becoming? I couldn't hide forever, and I couldn't keep pretending. One night, my husband came home early from a business trip. I didn't hear his car. I didn't hear the door. I was in the shower, washing away the scent of Jerome. When I stepped out, he was standing there in the bedroom, looking at me, soaked, naked, vulnerable. His face was still too still. "What's going on, Lisa?" he asked, voice low. Froze. "What do you mean?" "You've changed," he said. "You think I haven't noticed the way you glow when you come back from yoga? The way you smile to yourself when you think I'm not looking?" I wrapped a towel around me slowly, heart pounding in my chest. "I don't know what you're talking about." He stepped closer. "Is there someone else?" It was the question. The one I had dreaded but also needed. Because maybe, just maybe, I was tired of hiding. "Yes," I whispered. His eyes flinched. "Who?" I hesitated. "Jerome." The silence that followed was like glass shattering in slow motion. He stepped back like the name punched him in the gut. "The driver," he spat. "The damn driver." I didn't answer. I didn't defend. What could I say? He walked out, slammed the door, and just like that, everything came crashing down. The next morning he was gone. He left a note. "I need time. Don't call me." I sat alone at the table, the quiet of the room pressing in on me. My coffee, once steaming and comforting, had long since cooled, forgotten in my hands. The silence seemed to stretch for miles, echoing in the empty space between my thoughts and the weight in my chest. I wasn't sure what I was feeling. Guilt, fear, uncertainty, maybe all of it. But there was something else there, something deeper, something raw. For the first time since this all began, I cried. I didn't cry out of regret, though, not exactly. I wasn't sorry for the choices I'd made, not in the way I thought I would be. No, I cried because I realized this was the end of something. It was the end of a chapter one had held on to for years. Maybe it was the end of my marriage. Maybe it was the end of the life I had carefully built and sculpted, brick by brick. But it was also the beginning of something else. Something truer. Something more honest than I had ever allowed myself to imagine. The tears flowed freely now, as if the dam inside me had finally cracked. And in that release, there was a strange sense of liberation, as though I had been holding my breath for far too long and was finally exhaling. But even as the tears fell, I couldn't escape the gnawing feeling that the life I knew was slipping away from me. And perhaps it needed to. That afternoon I couldn't stay still. The weight of the morning's realization settled heavily on me. I needed to make contact, to find a way to step forward into the unknown. And so, I did the only thing that seemed right in that moment. Called Jerome. He answered immediately. His voice, calm and steady as always, seemed to ground me somehow, even through the phone. I told him everything. All of it. The loneliness I had endured, the emptiness in my marriage, the way I had found something in him that I had long forgotten existed in me. I told him about the days spent pretending, about the years of silence, about the awakening that had come too late but not too late enough to matter. He listened quietly, without interruption, without judgment. There was no pressure to explain or justify. His understanding was a soft blanket, wrapping around the sharp edges of my truth. When I finished speaking, the weight of it all still lingered in the air, thick and heavy between us. "I was never leaving mine," I said finally, the words sounding almost foreign as they left my lips. "I wasn't planning this. I never thought I'd end up here. But now I can't ignore what this has become. What you have become." There was a pause on the other end of the line. I could almost hear him breathing, the quiet sound of him processing, listening, understanding. Then he spoke, his voice low but full of warmth. "I'm sorry," I whispered, the apology slipping out of me without thinking. "I didn't plan for any of this." "I know," he said softly. "Neither did I." His words were simple, but they carried so much. There was no blame in his voice, no anger or resentment, just a quiet understanding that seemed to transcend everything that had happened before. It was as though we both knew this was bigger than us, bigger than the tangled mess of emotions we had found ourselves in. We didn't need to apologize. We didn't need to say all the things that might have made this easier to explain. The truth was there, unspoken between us. I looked at him then, really looked at him. This man who had shown me what it felt like to be seen again. Not just to be looked at, but to be truly seen. He had reminded me what it was like to feel wanted, to feel desired, not for the roles we played or the convenience of proximity, but for who I truly was beneath all the walls I had built around myself. The truth of me that I had hidden for so long, even from myself. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest as I asked the question that had been weighing on my mind since this whole thing started. "What happens now?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. The silence hung between us, heavy with unspoken possibilities. It was a simple question, but it held so much more. What had happened now? Where did we go from here? Did we continue down this path, knowing it was fragile, knowing it was full of unknowns? Or did we retreat back into the lives we had come from, the ones that, despite their flaws, were still comfortable and predictable? But somehow I knew. Even as the question left my lips, I understood that the answer didn't lie in a single choice. It was in the journey ahead, the one that would be defined not by what we left behind, but by what we were willing to step into. He reached for my hand, his touch warm and steady. The weight of it was grounding, like a tether pulling me back from the edge of my own uncertainty. "Whatever you want, Lisa," he said. His voice soft but resolute, as though he had already made peace with whatever this was becoming. And for the first time in a long time, I knew exactly what I wanted. It wasn't the life I had been living, the one I had meticulously crafted with so many layers of pretense. It wasn't a life where I had been invisible to the man I had married, a man who, despite all his success and power, never truly saw me. It wasn't the comfort that came with knowing exactly where I stood, but at the same time, standing there empty, emotionally starving. No more pretending. No more waiting for someone who would never notice when I was suffocating inside. No more surviving on love that had long since gone cold. I didn't want that life anymore. I wanted something real. I wanted to feel something deeper than what I had ever known, something that pulsed with life and passion. Even if it was messy, even if it didn't come neatly packaged with all the answers, even if it meant walking away from everything I had known, from the life I had spent years building. I wanted to choose myself. That was the decision I made in that moment, when Jerome took my hand. A decision to let go of the life that no longer fit me, the one that had smothered who I truly was beneath layers of expectations. I had spent too long running away from my own desires, from the truth that had been screaming at me for years. But now I wasn't running anymore. I was stepping forward into the unknown, into something that might break me but could also rebuild me into something truer. A few months later, Michael filed for divorce. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't angry, nor was it loud and full of accusations. It was quiet, almost subdued. There was no shouting, no bitterness, just a quiet sadness that hung in the air between us. It wasn't that we didn't care. It was simply that we had both grown so far apart that even the sadness felt like a distant echo. It was necessary. I knew it, and Michael knew it too. There was no other way. The marriage we had was already gone, buried beneath the weight of years of neglect and silence. The divorce papers were just the final exhale of something that had been dying for a long time. And as the ink dried on the papers, I moved on. I moved on with Jerome, with the man who had made me feel seen again. Our relationship didn't blossom into a perfect love story overnight. There were struggles, doubts, and fears, so many of them. The path wasn't easy, and there were moments when I wondered if I had made the right choice, if I had just jumped into the unknown out of desperation for something real. But through it all, what we had was different. It was honest. It was fiery. It was alive in a way I had never experienced before. Jerome didn't love me out of convenience or obligation. He loved me for who I truly was. Flaws, scars, and all. He didn't try to fix me, didn't try to make me into something I wasn't. He simply accepted me. And that acceptance, that raw, unfiltered love, was like a breath of fresh air. Every time he looked at me, I saw it in his eyes, like I was his whole world, his everything. The way he cared for me, the way he made me feel valuable, loved in a way that wasn't transactional or expected. It was something I never thought I'd experience again. And every night, when he held me close, I couldn't help but thank the snow for trapping us that day. For forcing us to slow down, to face what had been building between us, to strip away all the walls and pretenses that had kept us apart. The storm had shown me something I hadn't known I was missing. A different kind of love. A kind of love that made me feel whole again. A kind of love that wasn't perfect, but it was mine and it was real. I know that many people will judge me for what I did. They'll point fingers and whisper about the lines I crossed, the vows I broke, the promises I shattered. I can already hear the whispers of betrayal, the shaking heads of those who can't understand how someone like me could make such a choice. But the truth is, sometimes it takes getting lost to finally find yourself. Sometimes you have to break free from the life that has held you captive to discover what it really means to live, feel, to love. And so this is my story. Not one of perfection, but one of truth. Of choosing yourself, even when it's hard. Of walking away from the safety of a life that no longer fits and stepping into the unknown with open arms, ready to embrace what's real, even if it's messy. If you loved Lisa's journey and want more stories like this, stories that explore the complexities of love, desire, and the choices that shape us, don't forget to subscribe to True Infidelity Stories. This is where emotion meets temptation, where the truth comes alive, and where real stories unfold. Join us as we explore the messy, beautiful, and often unexpected ways we find ourselves and each other. Thank you for staying with us. If you find it interesting and useful, please subscribe, like, and share so you don't miss the next video. Thanks.